host Giles, and with me today I have regulars Robbie from Arsenal Fan TV. We've got Amanda, the bitch, from Gooniverse Podcast, and also special guests we've got Mark King, and also from AISA we've got Paul Mack. Let's start, Paul, with introducing yourself and finding out what your organisation does and the history of it.
Hi, well, AFTV was formed 1st of October 2000, great day for Arsenal Football Club, remember that Thierry Henry goal against Manchester United. Yes. Formed by myself and another guy called Stephen Powell, and our first campaign was around the move to what is now the Emirates Stadium, supporting that, mobilising support for it and mobilising opposition to all the NIMBYs in the Highbury area where we're sitting who don't like football and were worried it was going to affect the value of their houses. After that, we moved on to being a general campaigning organisation, and that's what we've been ever since. So for 14 years, still quite a young organisation in many ways, but older than some. So we've seen quite a lot of changes at Arsenal, some good, some bad. We have an active membership, and we work like every voluntary organisation does, with members and AGM. We form our policy, and we do our best to achieve the goals by discussions with Arsenal.
You've been involved in quite a few official campaigns involving Arsenal. You were involved in the badge change. You were involved in the move from Highbury to the Emirates. How did you liaise with the club? How did you get this sort of generate the interest from the supporters and so on?
Well, those two examples you give are very different, of course. The move from Highbury was, as I say, how we were formed, and that was the only one where, if you like, we were working totally collaboratively with the club, and that was before that. That was in the very early days, and that was to achieve planning permission when lots of people were opposed to it. So we campaigned, we mobilised supporters, we went to meetings, we wrote in the local press. And we just made it clear that the opposition to the building of the Emirates Stadium, which was a very vociferous campaign in the Highbury area, was a minority campaign. And I mean, I think the most famous quote that we came out with was that that 0.05% of residents in Highbury had signed a petition against it, and that really kind of showed up the level of opposition. After that, we formed ourselves into a membership organisation. The badge was something that we knew nothing about. I don't think any Arsenal supporters, apart from the relatively privileged half a dozen or whatever it was that were on an Arsenal focus group, knew about. People remember it was in the double year, 2001-2 double year, the match against Southampton, the last one that we didn't win in that run into that season. We won every other match after that, and they took the badge around the stadium pre-match, and the club were, I think, shocked at the people were booing when it got to the North Bank and booed again when it got to the clock ends, and our members decided that we didn't like the badge, but in particular we felt what was totally wrong was that Arsenal had done this without any discussion with supporters. That was almost more important than the actual badge change itself. So we did our best to mobilise support. We contacted fanzine editors, Highbury High, the Gooner. We contacted other supporters organisations like the supporters clubs, which were the main ones in existence at that time, and we did a lot of work complaining about the change, saying it hadn't been thought through, that we didn't necessarily think it was a good change, and why were the club doing this? It so happened they had just set up the official fans forum as well at the same time. So they just set up a consultative group that had met a few weeks beforehand, had its very first meeting, and nobody on that fans forum had even the slightest idea that this was coming. So it was a bit ironic. The first small sign of democracy in the club in terms of working with supporters, and at the same time they were doing something that a lot of traditionalists in particular were opposed to. So we tried to bring different groups together, and we did press work and we did other campaigning, ultimately unsuccessful, as you know, the badge. The hoo-haw, after a while, most people forgot about it. We didn't, but, people move on to something else. But that was the first campaign that we ever ran.
What was their reason for changing the badge?
I think there were two reasons. The reason given by Keith Edelman, who was the managing director at the time, was that there were problems with the copyright of the official badges, and there were genuine problems with copyright. But I think they also wanted the opportunity to modernise,
rebrand.
Yeah, as you know, that's what happens in so many organisations in the modern world. And of course, Arsenal hadn't always had the same badge for 100 years. You know, as we subsequently discovered when we looked at it, they had 7, 8, 10 badges, and it was quite interesting going through and looking at the history of the club. But I think those were the two primary reasons: the copyright issues and the fact of creating a new modern identity.
Over time, people would argue that AISA have been less in the limelight than other organisations. Other organisations have come to be, AST, BSM, and so on, and they've sort of engaged more with the supporters on a mass view and with media and so on. What would you say in terms of, you know, your organisation and your, for want of a better word, relative reluctance to be so much in the spotlight with certain campaigns?
Sure. I mean, I think your point about media is particularly valid. We've long recognised that our media work is weaker than particularly the AST and some others as well. It's the nature of voluntary organisations. You know, we all have only so many hours to do, and you have to decide how you spend that time. But it isn't the best. I'm glad I'm invited here today. Thank you so much for that. And maybe that was one small step. In terms of dialogue with supporters, I don't accept that at all. We have a database of 11,000 full and associate members that we communicate with regularly. We have an AGM, it's next week. We have regular committee meetings. We are a classic voluntary organisation that's run by volunteers, is for volunteers, and represents. And ultimately, although we run an annual survey, 1,500 people took part in it when we did the most recent one. But ultimately, we're accountable to our members. So it's a membership organisation. We're not accountable to the massive Arsenal supporters. We are the largest Arsenal supporters organisation. We also, I think, now have a different ethos from some of the organisations you've mentioned. And that's not a bad thing, because different supporters, frankly, have quite different views. And it's good that there are different organisations there to represent them. My view is that the BSM only came into existence because of the playing performance, not because of anything to do with ticket prices or anything else. And I can go into that if you want to. I know that they don't see that as their main objective now, but I think if Arsenal had been winning trophies at the Emirates Stadium, the BSM would never come into existence. The AST was set up by ASA. We provided £1,000 to them to set them up. And the reason for that was we thought fan ownership is such an important issue, it deserves an organisation of its own. And that was our philosophy. And there was actually a debate within ASA at the time. You know, should we set up what could become a rival organisation? And the majority view was we should, because having fans on the board, which was one of the objectives of ASA. Now, of course, that was a different time. That was a time when there was a degree of plurality of ownership. We didn't have one owner as we have now. So, and so AST has different issues and has become a different organisation. We also, I think, over a period, we've been in existence 14 years, we've campaigned in different ways. We've campaigned through the media, and we've campaigned in other ways and meetings. And our genuine perception is that when we have achieved something, and sometimes we have, we've done it through the force of the argument and through making that argument to Arsenal rather than running to the media. However tempting running to the media and appearing on the TV is, and we all love that with egos, we all love that approach, of this person. Bottom line for us is what works, and our view is what works is building a relationship. There is also a philosophical view, I think, to some extent, which is we don't see Arsenal as the enemy, which sometimes is how it is perceived. We don't actually think we could run the club better than Arsenal. We think that people who work at Arsenal are our friends, from the very top to the very bottom. We believe that we should be working with those people. It doesn't mean they're always right, no more than I am or you are or anybody else is. But I've seen the club change personally over 14 years, and in terms of the way it operates, it is a more professional organisation. I've seen things I don't like, as well as things I do like. But genuinely, we don't see Arsenal as the enemy. We see them as our friends. We see ourselves as part of the Arsenal family and part of the Arsenal community, not an outside organisation. People get very passionate about it, and I know some of the people with who I completely disagree how they work, but I absolutely respect their right to do what they do, and to represent supporters' views in the way they do it. It's just different for us.
You wrote a very interesting blog, you put it on the online Gooner, about the different, say, factions or different supporter groups. Do you want to sort of tell us a bit more about your reasons for writing the blog and the responses you got from the blog?
The reason I wrote it was I just got kind of fed up of seeing all the backbiting and sniping that seems to go on, mainly on social media. So it is out in the open for all Arsenal supporters and then the media to see as well, between the various groups and between different big Arsenal Twitter accounts. We've got to the point now where we're getting debates. You had Jeff and Mo, and then last night I think there was a tag team event between, and it's two sides, and they, and to my mind, I'm sort of thinking we're spending a lot of time arguing with each other, and whilst debate is good between different opinions, I think that's excellent, but we're spending so much time arguing. I think we're losing sight that maybe the club has done a little bit of divide and conquer, and that they're not going to be unhappy about the fact that we're spending all our focus on each other and bigging each other up, and then not looking at some of the things that maybe the club are doing and some of the things that are happening overall in football that are just unacceptable for fans, and really we need to be doing something about. And there are campaigns out there. So I wanted to. One of the things I just wanted to ask Paul, based on that, was I understand completely what you've just said about your ethos and how you see you can work with the club. Has that changed over the last couple of years since we've been owned by one person rather than before, when there were a few shareholders and a board that looked after it? Now it's Stan's club. Have you seen it change? And if so, do you think that if it continues that way, that the way that you're approaching it is actually sustainable?
Our way of working hasn't changed at all. Interesting talking to the club's employees in lots of ways. You get positive feedback from them, because what they say is that they can get on with their job without being interfered by the big boss elsewhere. So that perception of some of the club's employees is not that they don't comment on whether they think that having Stan Kroenke as owner is good or bad, but from the perception of doing their own job, they have more freedom to do their own job, and they see that as a good thing. It does change things long term. Having a single owner, it changes things not just for Arsenal, but every other. Lots of other clubs are moving down similar lines, and possibly the appointment of Ivan Gazidis anticipated that. He was used to working with 20 US franchises, and each one had one owner. None of this namby-pamby British stuff of having plurality of directors. So it has changed some things, but it hasn't changed day-to-day working. And in my view, it hasn't changed the way in which you're most likely to influence Arsenal. So the changes on one hand, yes. Changes in the way ASA works, no.
Right, so you wouldn't say it's becoming harder then?
I'd say that that it's sometimes more difficult to be certain about where the club is going. At the moment, it's more difficult, and not having access. Whether that matters, who knows? But certainly in the days of Danny Fisman, before him David Dean, Hillwood and so on, you could to a certain extent see people and have a dialogue with them, and feel an empathy. We're in a different world now with Stan Kroenke.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I want to ask a question. Do they actually listen? do the club actually listen to your group, to the BSM, to the AFTV? Do they actually listen? I mean, as you said, there's always lots of debates on social media, on our channel, on loads of different things, but do the club actually listen? That is the question that I think every fan wants to know.
Well, I don't think there's any question that they listen. To me, what's more important is whether they do anything, whether they do anything about it.
Yeah.
But if you think, some raw power sometimes makes clubs listen, but in general, I don't believe that exists within Arsenal supporters organisation.
But do you see then that's maybe why, say, you have a group like the BSM that have decided that they're going to be a bit more different in their approach, a bit more vocal in their approach, because they probably perceive it that sometimes the club don't listen. So they're like, you know what, well, we're going to do a protest then. We're going to direct action. We're going to go outside the ground, big banners, get the media involved. Do you think that that's the reason why they do that a lot of the times?
I think it works in the modern world. Putting the banners, going on Sky, gets you the immediate hit. Whether it has any long-term influence is a different matter. I also think that it's actually doesn't quite logically make sense. Of course, football doesn't logically make sense. In the last 6 years at Highbury, ticket prices went up 250%. Yeah, I didn't, not 2.5, not 25, 250%. ASA was the only organisation even saying a word about it. Nobody else, including all the BSM guys and so on, who all around, then BSM didn't exist, but they were all around, some of them on our mailing lists and members and so on. Nobody said a word about it. And frankly, any attempt at getting any protest didn't achieve very little, because we were winning trophies, because we, won the double. We had the invincible season, we won the FA Cup. Come to the Emirates Stadium, we've been here, 9 years now, 10 years, and the ticket prices have gone up barely in line with inflation, and yet people are going berserk about it. So there's no logic in it. It's all to do with achievement, winning trophies. So people say they're protesting about ticket prices, but the reality is they're protesting because they want to win trophies, and they want to feel they're making progress. It doesn't matter if you're bottom, if you think next season you can be a few places up. I think it also doesn't matter, if us as fans said, you have one season when you win the league, and you have 4 seasons when you come 10th, or you have 5 seasons when you come 4th, which would you pick? And the vast majority of fans would pick the first, in my view. Win the league once, or win the Champions League, and write off 4 seasons. Just to win it once would be fantastic, especially the Champions League, which we've never won. But from the club's point of view, in terms of maintaining long-term sustainability, coming 4th and 3rd is much more effective. It means more resources in the club. It keeps the club at a certain level for a period of time. Marching past the chief executive's office and saying, you're a fucking whatever, is not, in my view, a way in which you're most likely to influence him. It's as simple as that. Producing leaflets comparing Arsenal and Bayern Munich. Nice leaflet, but we're in different leagues, in different circumstances. There are lots of things English football can learn from German football. I think we're all starting to realise that.
Wasn't the leaflet produced on the back of Ivan Gazidis saying that we're in a position that we can actually match a club like Bayern Munich financially going forward?
I don't know, but I'm quite happy to believe that. The club for many years, ever since the move to Emirates Stadium, have always said we have the resources to go out and buy anyone we want. I think most fans probably understood then, and certainly understand now, if they didn't understand then, that financially the club was not strong after the first few years of going to Emirates Stadium. But my point is that different organisations come from different experiences. ASA's very first founding principle was that we were not going to get involved in picking the team, deciding who the manager was. We'd seen how other supporters organisations collapse under that. And after all, what's so great about football? We can all have an opinion about whether we think, Thierry Henry is the best player in the world or not. I have a friend who, at the time that he was at his peak, was constantly moaning about it. That's what you get in football, and that's why football is the best game in the world, and that's because we all have an opinion. But then we go home and we forget about it and come back 2 weeks later. And meanwhile, the club has to move on. I think it's good that there were different supporters organisations representing different strands of opinion. So I think in that sense it's good.
But don't you feel, though, to make the progress, you do all need to come together on one point? The main point is the pricing of the tickets. I mean, for instance, my season tickets, extortionate, and I'm not even in one of the best seats. I don't think people do go home and forget the ticket, because obviously on our podcast we talk about ticket prices a lot and people can't get tickets. It's not, I mean, as we spoke before we came on, Highbury, you can get a ticket whenever you wanted. In the 80s there was thousands of seats available. So I don't think it's people go away and forget, especially now with social media. It's 24 hours a day. It's not like the 80s. We went home and we might watch Match of the Day and that would be it for a week or so. I understand that, but I do feel that all of them, and I'm a member of the AST, should come together. It's not that we want to pick the team or pick the manager. I mean, it's in my black and white world, and how I live, is the club have told us they've got 180 million quid, yet we've got no defence. I mean, we'll go into all this. We now are the bare bones we could be. Each week we're getting injuries. So how can not all the groups come together?
The groups have different views about different things, but we have, for example, we jointly met with the AST, with the club, when they decided to introduce different banding, and both AST and ourselves supported that. We both thought it was a financially neutral proposal. Club weren't going to get more money out of it, but they were going to put prices up for big games, and they were going to reduce them for the games at the bottom and keep them the same in the middle. Now we get constant flack on that, and people talk about the £100 ticket, and I understand all of that. But the reality was that got thousands of people into watching football at the Emirates Stadium that weren't able to watch it before because they couldn't afford it. Of course, it also helped to solve the club's marketing problems, where even though we have a full house every week, the point I make is that in 2000, when we came into existence, you'll see. Let's assume you're on the lowest price season to get £1,000. Your season ticket cost £400. Between then and 2006, it went up to about £900. It more than doubled. In fact, it was under £400. It's probably about £350. The cheapest season ticket at Arsenal was below £400. It's about £350, something like that. So it went up from £350 to £900. An unbelievable increase.
How many years was that?
Over 5 years.
Right.
But of course, we were winning the double. We had the Invincibles. Nobody said a word. You didn't say a word.
No.
BSM didn't say a word.
It.
Nobody said a word. Now your season ticket has only actually gone up another £100 since we got to Emirates, and now you think of it as extortionate. Bottom line is, if we're winning trophies,
I agree with you.
You're happy. If we're going through finishing third and fourth every season and not looking like we're making progress. That's the key thing. Yeah. Looking like you're making progress. Fans think it's Groundhog Day every season, and the perception is the money. Where's the money going? We're not getting it. We can't see it on the field, and so on.
I think you'd class as value for money.
Yeah,
absolutely. But do you want the ticket prices reduced, which will give us less ability to buy?
It doesn't buy what we need now. So.
So you would. So you'd be in favour of ticket prices going down and less income.
If he bought what we needed, I'm happy to pay. That's what I'm saying. Value for money.
It's difficult with the amount of money that comes in outside of match day revenue to argue that. I mean, the ticket prices could have gone down. I think I'll come to the 3% in a minute, but the ticket prices overall could have come down with the huge amount of money that TV have just ploughed in again. But no sign of it. Instead, what happens? We get a 3% increase out of nowhere, and for no real valid reason. And I think that it's not so much the 3%, because people will go, that 3%, and I said that in the blog. It's £30 a year. That's not going to.
It's a symbolism.
Yeah, I can stick another 30 quid into the club. That's fine. But it was the fact it wasn't needed. I'd rather go and give that 30 quid to some guy sleeping homeless, to be perfectly honest, because at least he'll put it to use buying himself a bottle of syrup.
Totally agree.
But it was just unnecessary completely. And then what makes it worse is that, all of a sudden when the accounts come through, you see that there's a £3 million fee being paid KSC for advisory services, not really explaining any more detail than that, which kind of equated to the 3% as far as I'm aware. And then, just to make that even worse, is that last week KSC managed to go out and buy another load of shares. So, I'm liking Stan Kroenke's new version of fan share. Yeah, the fans share some more money with him, so he can go and buy some more of the company, and keep it.
It's a good line.
That I think that's what annoys people more than anything. And what I really would have liked to have seen at the time, and maybe that boat sailed now, I don't know, but even now is to ask the club at the AGM, is to say to them, here is three things that happened. You whacked 3% on, you paid £3 million out to KSC. KSC spent a load of money on the shares. Now, it's not like Stan needed the £3 million. He's got more money than anyone's. But why aren't we asking that question? And why then is it not all of the supporters groups? Because this is the sort of thing that surely all of the supporters groups should be able to see is a valid question. It's not negative. It's not disrespectful. It's not. We're not asking anyone to do anything on a match day that could impact the performance of the team, because that's number one in any kind of protest. Don't do anything that's going to damage the team on the pitch. So why can't all four groups come together? And when I've asked this question, I've heard various reasons why, and a lot of it is based around politics, egos, not wanting to rock the boat, people that maybe have an ulterior motive for not upsetting the club for some reason that maybe people don't know. I asked one of the guys who writes one of the most popular blogs, and he wasn't interested. He said, no, I don't do political. Well, I'm sorry, mate, you've got 200,000 people tune into your blog. It's too late for you to say you don't want to be political, because they're not reading your blog because they think you're full of shit. They're reading it because they agree with your opinions. So how can you say then, no, I don't want to get involved in anything like this? Why can someone like that not add their weight to the four supporters groups and ask this question and put it forward, and other people as well? And I can't, at the end of the day, we're all supposed to be here for one reason, that we love the Arsenal, but we don't seem to be able to think that's the reason why I'm doing this. So I need to put aside all these other things. I need to park my ego. I need to make some compromises. I need to shake this fella's hand that 2 weeks ago we were calling each other all sorts on Twitter. Why can't they do that? I don't understand. And maybe I'm just being extremely naive, and I'm sure people probably think that. But to me, I think we've got to do something, because he's part of a bigger picture as well. It's not just about what Stan Kroenke's doing at Arsenal.
Can I ask you something, Mark?
It's about football as a whole, and we've seen the 30, another game, the week where we've had NFL, they want to do an away game.
I just want to ask Mark something though. But what Paul's saying is, if we were winning trophies every year, would you be worried about that little 2-3% rise?
I think this is the thing. We have to. I understand fully Paul's point. When you're winning trophies, you kind of forget all about that, probably because half the time you're drunk in the Bailey celebrating a win or something, But you do tend to forget about that, or you think about it, but it doesn't matter, we're winning trophies. So I fully take that on board. And yes, it has escalated over the years. But the interesting thing is now, after the first time in 9 years we win a trophy, not everyone's shelved all their complaints. It's still there, and the events post the FA Cup win haven't really kind of helped. The 3% and other things that have happened as well. So I think people need to not just worry about the results and think about actually the future.
Well, that's what Paul was saying at the beginning, weren't you? About
I think in conclusion, we'd like to see the supporters groups come together under one banner, if that can happen.
From time to time, they must.
They have and they do. For example, we went to a meeting organised by Mark Brindle, who supporter at the time, now supporters liaison officer working for the club, and coming out of that were several things. One was that the different supporters organisations said that they would stop slagging each other off, which we were quite relieved about, because we don't use Twitter very much, to be honest, but we read the comments and so on. Another was that we would write a joint letter to the club, to Kroenke, and we did. And not sure we achieved anything, to be honest, but it was done. And there will be other things I mentioned before, when the club proposed introducing the different graded Spish, we attended that meeting with AST and the club and discussed it. The idea about having the junior section behind the goal, that came from a fan, and that was backed in different ways by AST, by ourselves. Other things that are not always so successful. We were passionately arguing for the away fans to be put in the upper tier. We thought that works in all different ways, and BSM supported that. They thought it was a good idea. AST opposed it. So there will be differing views. There's no principled reason, but equally there's no nirvana. The fact that the 4 club organisations sit around the table and have a little meeting with club officials is not going to suddenly change things. And I think it's a mistake. I wouldn't say naive, but it's a mistake to think it will. We will work together. We work together on different organisations. We have to set up Red Action, for example, but also the different organisations. Just to finish, our view is the different organisations should have different objectives. Red Action is there, in our view, it's set up to promote atmosphere, not to campaign on the toilets at Emirates Stadium. AST was set up to pursue fan ownership. They have a really difficult job now with a single owner, impossible job in some ways. But that was their objective. ASA has always been, had a wider view than doing the nitty gritty. And we think we should do what we do best. And if we can use different tactics, some people want to go and march on the streets, some people want to do it in private meetings, other people want to do it through the press, then I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's good. Different fans' views represented in different ways.
Get the Arsenal Fan TV app, available on Apple and Android now.